The rain had not stopped for 3 days when Emily Carter finally understood that God, if he was listening at all, had forgotten about her. She stood at the edge of a muddy road somewhere between two towns whose names she could barely remember anymore. One hand pressed against the small of her aching back, the other gripping the splintered wheel of a wagon that would not move another inch. Her belly was heavy with a child that would come in less than 2 months. Her husband had been dead for 4 of those months, thrown from his horse chasing down a stray steer, gone before the doctor even arrived. And now, alone on a road going nowhere, with everything she owned soaked through and sinking into the mud beneath her, Emily Carter sat down on the wet ground and let herself cry for the first time since the funeral. She had told herself she would not cry. Crying did not fix wheels. Crying did not feed a horse that had gone lame 2 days back. Crying did not bring a husband home. But sitting there in the cold rain, feeling her baby shift and turn inside her as if sensing her despair, she could not hold it back any longer. That was when she heard the horse. If this story is already pulling at your heart, stay with me because it only gets more tender from here. Comment below and tell me where in the world you're watching from tonight. And if slow, healing Western love stories are your comfort food the way they are mine, go ahead and subscribe. Now let's get back to Emily, sitting in the mud, and the horse that was about to change everything. The rider who appeared through the gray sheets of rain was a big man, broad in the shoulders, sitting tall in his saddle the way men do when they have spent a lifetime on horseback. His hat was pulled low against the storm, his coat soaked through, but he slowed the moment he saw her, a woman sitting in the mud beside a broken wagon, looking like the world had finally worn her down to nothing. He swung down off his horse before she could even find the strength to stand, closing the distance between them in a few long strides. "Ma'am," he said, his voice low and steady, the kind of voice that did not startle a frightened animal or a frightened woman. "You hurt?" Emily wiped at her face, embarrassed to be found like this, sitting in the mud like a child who had fallen and could not get back up. "I'm fine, just tired. Wheels cracked and my horse threw a shoe 2 days back. I was trying to make it to Millbrook before dark." The man crouched down slightly, careful to keep his distance, careful not to crowd her, and looked at the wagon wheel, then at her belly, then back at her face with an expression that was not pity, but something steadier. Concern, plain and honest. "Millbrook's another 6 miles from here," he said. "You can't walk that in your condition, and this wagon isn't going anywhere tonight." "I don't have much choice," Emily said. And though she tried to keep her voice firm, it cracked slightly at the edges, betraying just how frightened she truly was. The man studied her for a long moment, rain dripping steadily from the brim of his hat, and then he did something Emily did not expect. He held out his hand. "Name's Nathaniel Cole," he said. "Got a ranch about 2 miles back that way. My wagon's dry and my house has a warm fire. You're not spending the night out here, ma'am. Not in your condition. Not in this storm." Emily hesitated, staring at his outstretched hand. She did not know this man. A woman alone, especially one carrying a child, had every reason to be cautious of strangers on empty roads. But something about the steadiness in his eyes, the calm patience in the way he waited without pushing, made the fear in her chest ease, just slightly. "I couldn't ask that of you," she said quietly. "Didn't ask you to ask," Nathaniel said. "Get in my wagon. I'll have my hired hand come back for yours in the morning, once the rain clears." There was something so simple, so final about the way he said it, that Emily found herself taking his hand before she had even fully decided to. He helped her up carefully, one hand supporting her back, the other steady beneath her arm, treating her like something precious rather than something broken. His wagon, pulled up just behind his horse, was covered and dry, blankets folded neatly in the back as if he always kept them ready for anyone caught in weather like this. He helped her inside, tucked a wool blanket around her shoulders without a word, and then climbed up front, guiding the horses through the storm toward home. Emily sat quietly for a long while, watching the rain streak down the sides of the wagon, feeling warmth slowly return to her frozen fingers. "Thank you," she finally said, "for stopping." "Couldn't leave a woman sitting in the mud," Nathaniel said simply, "especially not one carrying a baby." "Most men would have kept riding," Emily admitted quietly. especially once they saw I was like this. She rested a hand over her belly, the old shame of widowhood and vulnerability creeping back into her chest. Nathaniel glanced back at her for just a moment, his expression unreadable beneath the rain. "Then most men aren't worth much," he said, and turned his eyes back to the road. His ranch, when they arrived, was modest but sturdy, a well-kept house with smoke curling from the chimney, a barn nearby holding several horses that nickered softly as they passed. Nathaniel helped her down from the wagon and into the house, where the warmth of the fire hit her like a physical embrace after days of cold and rain. "My housekeeper, Mrs. Doyle, left supper on the stove before she went home for the evening," Nathaniel said, hanging his soaked coat by the door. "You eat, get warm, rest. We'll figure out Millbrook in the morning." Emily sat by the fire, wrapped in dry blankets Nathaniel provided, eating a warm bowl of stew that tasted like the first real meal she'd had in days. Nathaniel sat across from her, quiet, giving her space, though she could feel his careful attention, the way his eyes checked on her without making her feel watched. "Can I ask," Emily said softly, staring into the fire, "why you stopped? Really stopped, I mean. You didn't know me." Nathaniel was quiet for a moment, turning his cup of coffee slowly in his rough hands. "Lost my wife 2 years back," he said finally. "Consumption took her slow, over almost a year. Watched her get weaker every day and couldn't do a thing to stop it." His voice was steady, but Emily could hear the years of grief woven carefully beneath his calm. "After that, I told myself I wasn't going to let anybody suffer in front of me again if I could help it. Not if I had the power to do something about it." Emily's chest ached hearing it, recognizing a pain that mirrored her own. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "That kind of loss, it doesn't ever really leave, does it?" "No," Nathaniel admitted. "But you learn to carry it different. Learn to let some light back in, even when it feels wrong to." They sat in comfortable silence after that, the fire crackling softly, rain still tapping gently against the windows. For the first time since her husband's death, Emily felt something loosen in her chest, a tightness she had carried for months finally easing, just slightly, in the presence of this quiet, steady stranger. Nathaniel insisted she stay the night in the spare room, and though every instinct told her to protest, to insist on her independence the way she had insisted on so many things since becoming a widow, exhaustion and the ache in her back convinced her otherwise. That night, lying in a warm bed for the first time in what felt like forever, Emily rested her hands over her belly, feeling her baby shift gently beneath her palms, and allowed herself, just for a moment, to believe that maybe things could still turn out all right. The following morning, the storm had cleared, leaving the world washed clean and glistening under pale morning sun. Nathaniel sent his hired hand, a young man named Tom, back down the road to retrieve Emily's broken wagon, while he himself worked quietly repairing the wheel in his own barn, refusing every offer of payment Emily tried to give him. "You don't owe me anything," he said simply, working the wood with steady, practiced hands. "Man helps where he can. That's all this is." But over the following days, as Emily found herself unable to travel further due to the damage still being repaired, something quiet began growing between them, warm and slow like the first days of spring after a long winter. Nathaniel found small reasons to check on her throughout each day, bringing extra firewood, asking if she needed anything from town, sitting with her by the fire in the evenings, sharing quiet conversation that filled the empty spaces in both their hearts. Emily, in turn, began helping around the house despite Nathaniel's protests, insisting she was not so fragile that she could not peel potatoes or mend a torn shirt while she waited. Don't forget to subscribe if you're loving Emily and Nathaniel's story so far. There are so many more slow, comforting love stories waiting for you here, the kind that remind us healing is possible, even after the deepest heartbreak. Now let's see what happens as Emily's time draws closer. One evening, nearly 2 weeks into her stay, Emily sat on the porch watching the sun set over Nathaniel's land, her hand resting on her belly as she felt a sharp, unexpected pain ripple through her. "Nathaniel," she called out, her voice tight with sudden alarm. He was at her side in seconds, kneeling beside her chair, his hands steady despite the concern flooding his eyes. "What is it? What's wrong?" I think it's coming," Emily gasped, another pain gripping her tightly. It's too early, Nathaniel, it's too early. Fear flashed across Nathaniel's face, but he did not let it show in his voice. I'm going to get the doctor. You're going to be all right, Emily. I promise you. You and this baby are going to be just fine. He helped her inside, settling her carefully into bed before riding hard into town himself rather than sending Tom, refusing to trust anyone else with something so precious. He returned within the hour, Dr. Hayes riding hard beside him, and for the next several agonizing hours, Nathaniel paced the hallway outside Emily's room, praying harder than he had prayed in years. When the baby's first cry finally broke through the tense silence of the house, Nathaniel felt something inside his chest crack open entirely, relief so overwhelming it nearly brought him to his knees. Dr. Hayes stepped out shortly after, smiling tiredly. Healthy baby boy, a bit early, but strong. Both mother and son are doing just fine. Nathaniel entered the room quietly, finding Emily exhausted but glowing, cradling her newborn son against her chest. She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face, and for the first time since he had found her sitting in the mud weeks before, he saw genuine peace in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't stopped that day." Nathaniel sat carefully on the edge of the bed, looking down at the tiny baby boy resting in her arms. "What are you going to name him?" Emily thought for a moment, looking between her son and the steady, gentle man who had saved them both. "Nathaniel," she said softly, "if that's all right with you." Nathaniel's throat tightened with emotion he had not allowed himself to feel in years. "Emily, I know it's soon," she said quickly. "I know we've both lost people we loved, and I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. But these past 2 weeks, staying here with you, I haven't felt like a burden. I haven't felt alone. For the first time since my husband died, I felt like maybe things could be all right again." Nathaniel reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair from her tired face, his touch tender despite his rough, calloused hands. "Emily, the moment I saw you sitting in that mud, something in me that had been closed off for 2 years just opened back up. I wasn't looking for this, wasn't looking for anyone, but I don't want you and this boy going anywhere. Not now, not ever if you'll let me be part of your lives." Emily felt tears slip down her cheeks, warm and full of a hope she had thought she buried alongside her husband months before. "We'd like that," she whispered. "Both of us." In the months that followed, Nathaniel insisted Emily and baby Nathaniel Jr. stay on at the ranch, first as guests, then as their bond deepened into something neither of them could deny any longer, as something far more permanent. He proposed to her on a quiet spring evening, right there on the porch where her labor pains had first begun, promising her a lifetime of steady devotion, patient love, and a home that would never again leave her sitting alone in the mud. They married in a small, warm ceremony surrounded by the ranch hands and neighbors who had come to know and respect the quiet widow and her steady rancher. Little Nathaniel Jr. sleeping peacefully in his mother's arms throughout the entire service. Years later, Emily would often sit on that same porch, watching Nathaniel teach their growing son how to ride, his patient hands guiding the boy just as gently as they had once guided her broken wagon to safety. She would think back to that storm, to that broken wheel, to the moment she believed she had nothing left, and she would smile, knowing that sometimes the darkest storms carry us exactly toward the shelter we are meant to find. "Get in my wagon," he had said, simple words spoken by a stranger in the pouring rain, words that had carried her not just to safety that night, but toward an entire lifetime of love, family, and belonging she never thought she would find again. If Emily and Nathaniel's story warmed your heart tonight, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what moment touched you most. Stories like theirs remind us that even in our darkest, most broken moments, love can still find us, patient and steady, ready to carry us home. Subscribe for more stories like this one, and I'll see you in the next tale.